Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to Bringing Parents into the Classroom with Brightspace for Parents webinar. My name is Adam Chihozewski with D2L, and I'll be your host today. Today we are going to have Valerie Howe from D2L presenting the webinar, and we will also be joined by Kevin Bradbeer from Toronto District School Board. So Valerie, why don't you kick us off today?
Thanks, Adam, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm sure everyone's had a really busy day, so I just want to make sure that I start by thanking you for putting some time aside to join us for the next 45 minutes or so. I come from a teaching background myself, so I know how precious your time is, and I just want to thank you for taking that time to join us today to learn more about Brightspace for Parents. This is the third part of a three-part series. So we did discuss portfolio for the first two. If you're interested, there are some recordings available to watch. And today we'll be chatting about Brightspace for Parents, which you have free access to, as well as the rest of the Brightspace platform as it's funded by the ministry. Quick note before we continue on with the webinar is I just want to note I'll be using the term parents and guardians interchangeably throughout the webinar to represent both parents and guardians when I use that terminology. As Adam mentioned, we have myself, Valerie Howe, and Adam C. here on the line, and we are virtual learning environment consultants from D2L, and we help support various school boards in the province with the use of Brightspace. So again, we're really happy to be here to speak with everyone today. Our agenda, we're going to talk about what is Brightspace, just to ensure that we're all on the same page about what that is and what Brightspace for Parents is. Then we're going to look into the window into the classroom and what parents and guardians will see when they're accessing Brightspace. We'll talk a little bit about how you can access it at TDSB. And then we'll finish off with some resources to help afterwards as you start getting on your way and getting started with using Brightspace. Okay, so again, I'd like to start by making sure we're all on the same page with a couple of names you might have heard floating around when talking about Brightspace or D2L. So firstly, the company is D2L, and we are the company that makes the learning platform Brightspace. So I like to think a little bit like when we're thinking about an iPhone with this. So Apple is the company, D2L is the company, iPhone is Apple's product, Brightspace is D2L's product. But you may have also heard the term Ontario's virtual learning environment or Ontario's VLE. And what this really is a virtual learning environment that's made up of Brightspace, but also other digital tools and resources that are offered by the Ministry of Education that every publicly funded school board has access to. So we like to call this Brightspace and other goodies. And when we're talking a little bit more about what is Brightspace itself, as I mentioned, Brightspace is a learning platform, and I like to think of it as a virtual extension of your physical classroom. So it's a ministry licensed platform that it's built up of many, many tools, including Brightspace for Parents, which we're going to be talking about today. And you can think of Brightspace as a whole toolkit that you have that's available to you to help with various areas of your teaching. So as you can see on the screen here, we have tools to help with communication and collaboration, organizing your course materials, to document student learning, provide feedback and assessment. And the main focus of today's webinar is being able to share information with parents and provide them that window into the classroom. So again, what exactly is Brightspace for Parents? So as I mentioned, Brightspace for Parents is truly a window into the classroom. It gives parents and guardians an insight into how their child or their children are doing in school. And when Brightspace for Parents team, the team here at D2L, was doing research into what our parent solution should be, they underwent a lot of research and spoke to parents. And what they found was most of what parents were interested in knowing could really be summed up into 3 questions. And those questions were, is my child okay? How are they doing? And how can I help? And then when the Brightspace for Parents team went and spoke with educators about parent engagement and their needs around that with parents and guardians, they came back and we heard overwhelmingly, I want to be communicating with parents. I want to be providing this information to them, but I don't have a lot of time to do this. So with our team being armed with that information, they realized that they could build a parent solution to help everyone. And if educators were using a few key tools in Brightspace, they could easily meet the needs of parents, guardians, and making it so that educators didn't have to do a lot of extra work. And those key tools that they identified as needing to feed into Brightspace for Parents were the following. So the first tool was our activity feed tool, which allows educators to make posts and post to the course homepage for students to see, and posting messages feeding into Brightspace for Parents. Our portfolio tool, which is again what our previous 2 webinar series were about, and being able to capture evidence of learning and pedagogical documentation of learning, our assignments tool, and also our grades tool. And we're going to get into a little bit more detail about these tools and how they feed into Brightspace for Parents. But before we get a little bit further into that, I just want to make a really important clear note here that only parents and students will see what is happening in the classroom. When information is being fed into Brightspace for Parents, that is not going to be accessible to other teachers, other students. Only the parents will see it, and the parents will only see the information that pertains to their children that they have custody of, because Brightspace for Parents works with the student information system. So parents are only going to have access to information for the children that the student information system knows that they have custody and the right to be seeing that. So everything remains really secure and really private, just as it should be. Okay, so this is what parents and guardians would see when they head into Brightspace for Parents. This would be one of the first things that they see. And another piece of feedback we heard while we were doing research was that parents expressed they were really overwhelmed sometimes when they had multiple class sites or places to visit to get information on their children. So one thing that's really nice in Brightspace for Parents is they don't need to worry about that. All of their children within the same school board will aggregate onto one page, as you can see here. So we have some students who span multiple grades. They might be in different schools, but we can see that they're all here on one page for parents. And guardians can also get some high-level information here if they're looking for a quick check-in. So some things I'd like to call out on this page is we can see if there's potentially some overdue work, if there's any upcoming work, and recent grades. And then you'll notice on the top third of the student's tile is a picture. And what that picture is showing is the most recent portfolio item that the educator has decided to share with parents. So for instance, maybe Ashley's parent or guardian logs in and she can see her science fair project. And maybe for her guardian, that makes a lot of sense. They've been chatting about it for the past little bit now as Ashley's been working on it, or maybe this is a new conversation starter for that night. Before we jump into a more granular view of what parents and guardians will see when they click into one of these students, I also just want to let you know that when parents start going into Brightspace for Parents, they can choose to opt in to receive weekly email summaries if they wish. So it's really easy for them to opt into that weekly email summary. It's also really easy for them to opt out if they choose not to or change their mind later. And this is really nice because they'll receive one email summary a week that's a digest of just letting them know if there's been any new activity for them to review in Brightspace for Parents. So there is that kind of additional notification there so they know if there's information for them to go in and check in Brightspace for Parents. So when a parent clicks into one of their children. This is the view that they'll see, and then they can actually drill down deeper into many parts of this page. But first, I just want to talk about the 5 components that Brightspace for Parents is made up of, and then we'll go into these parts in a little bit more detail. So the very first part at the top is this overdue alerts area. And then if we go to the middle row, starting on the left, we can see there's upcoming work, then recent grades, portfolio items, and latest posts, which is coming from a teacher's activity feed. So now let's explore where these sections connect within Brightspace. So as you can see from here, we have a bit of color coding to help show where all of this feeds in. I mentioned towards the beginning of the webinar that there will be a lot of information that can feed into Brightspace for Parents on behalf of the educator, so they're not having to send additional or spend additional time kind of deciding what they want to put into here. So when we look at overdue alerts, upcoming work, and recent grades, again, we'll get into a little bit more detail as we continue, but that's really pulling in from various assessment tools within the site, with recent grades specifically being graded items in a teacher's course. The portfolio items is evidence that an educator has decided to share with parents, and then the latest post here corresponds with the activity feed tool. So now we're going to dive into a little bit more detail with each of these sections within Brightspace for Parents and show exactly what an educator would be doing within their class and how that's then feeding into Brightspace for Parents and what that's going to look like for parents and guardians. So first we have overdue alerts, and what it's going to display here is basically any assessment item with a due date that has passed. It's going to appear right at the top of the page so that a parent or guardian knows that there's a potential that something might be overdue. And again, there's no extra work for the educator. If we head to the next slide here, you can see our breakdown of an educator sees versus what a guardian sees. So as an educator, I'm simply adding a due date to, for in this example, a quiz like I would normally do. And then if that item ends up being overdue, as a guardian, I can come and see that that's potentially overdue. And I'd love to call out the language here that the guardian is seeing, because it says that their child may be running behind. And this was actually really purposeful on D2L's part, because there could be additional context here as to why Will has not yet submitted this quiz. So we really didn't want this to be something that was accusatory of Will and him not submitting his work, but it's really meant to be about starting those conversations and having those parents be our partner and our champions in their student success, or their child's success, I should say. So instead of this being a wrist slap or anything like that, what we'd really like to see is, again, this promote conversations and questions so that parents and guardians are empowered to say things like, hey, Will, I saw that you might be behind with your motion and stability quiz. You know, is everything okay? Did something happen? Can I help? Because we know that as I'm sure everyone on the line and anyone, I guess, who has kids themselves knows, when you try and get that information from students, it's not always the easiest. You know, you're asking, hey, what'd you do in school today? Not much. Or, hey, do you have anything coming up? No. This now gives parents and guardians a little bit of, again, that window into the classroom so that they can have these conversations at home with their children. So with that, the next area I want to talk about is upcoming work. So again, very similar to the overdue alerts, because they're both working off of due dates here, any item with a due date within the next 2 weeks is going to show up here. And again, like I said, it is similar to overdue alerts, and that's because all of the assessment tools are feeding into Brightspace for Parents. And that way, you know, as an educator, if you're working with any of our assessment tools, that really important assessment information is being pushed into Brightspace from parents, which we know from Growing Success, the importance of sharing that assessment information with parents to better enable them to be your partner in their child's education. So I'm just going to head into the next view here. So again, as an educator, I can see here that I have 3 assignments built out with due dates. This is how I'm seeing it in my view as I kind of go about my daily routines and I'm setting up things for my students. And in Brightspace for Parents, the parents will be able to see the upcoming work for the next 2 weeks. We did this purposely so that guardians can focus on the work that's most important at that time. Parents can, however, click the View All work towards the bottom of that image on the right there, and they can scroll through the calendar to see work in the future if they wish. And the parent and guardian can click in and see the instructions, the attachments, the rubric, whatever information you've made available to the student to help be successful in their work. The parent will be able to see that too. So no more do we have that kind of issue of an upcoming assignment not getting home to the parent, and then the parent finding out at the last minute, the night before it's due, that their child, has something due. So again, just that really kind of crucial information to help with the student's success in helping to partner with them to help with that. And a really cool feature in the Guardian Sees image that I'd love to call out here is beside that first piece of upcoming work, the research paper, to the right of that, we can see there's a little green check mark here. And what that's denoting is if a piece of work has already been submitted. So as a parent, I can come in and I can see, okay, yep, looks like he has already submitted that research paper. Good, now we can work on that space travel assignment that's due on Friday. All right. The next item is recent grades. So for those who are maybe not as familiar with our assessment tools, when you create an assignment in Brightspace, you have the option to make it a gradebook item, which will then a grade item rather, which will then feed into your gradebook. So an assessment needs to be a grade item to display to parents in Brightspace for parents, and then all of the details of that assignment will be visible. So again, this is something that an educator will have already graded within the system, and then it's going to push out any completed rubrics, the assignment instructions, the feedback that was left on the assignment, the score out of. If the educator has decided to attach curriculum expectations, it will post that as well. So again, if we flip to the next slide, I can see as an educator on that left-hand side, that's my view when I am assessing an assignment in Brightspace. I can use my annotation toolbar, I can use my rubrics tool, my grading area, and I have, again, that yellow kind of box here pointed out because I need to, again, make it a grade item so that it is visible to parents. And I'm doing all of that in Brightspace, and I like to think of what shows in Brightspace for parents as basically everything that you're hoping makes it home in that backpack for parents to see. That maybe before you're hoping it gets home, but you don't know if it actually makes it home, or gets squished to the bottom of the backpack and maybe something like applesauce spills on it or something, and then parents can't read it. But with having that information in Brightspace for parents, now you know that it's getting home. So again, all of that hard work and time that you're putting into providing that feedback, into providing that information for students and how they can improve on their work, not only is that all going to be captured in one spot for students to see if you're doing it through the platform, but again, through no extra work on your part, it's now also something that parents can see and digest. So if we look in the Guardian Sees here, I have a nice list here of some recent grades from various subjects. And you can see here that some of these are percentages and some of them are levels. And this is dependent on the educator and how they've set up their grade book. So there is some flexibility here for how you are choosing to do your evaluation and how you're choosing to have that information present. So again, just want to call out that this is anything that you've released to a student. So if I've graded this and I've shared this feedback with students, then that is what's being pushed out to parents. If I haven't yet made that available to my students yet, then parents will not be able to see it either. And then again, within their parent view, there's a lot of different information that parents can see so that they can really get that entire context around the assignment. So you can't necessarily see everything in this screenshot that I've shared, but they would be able to see the instructions and any attachments that you gave for that assignment. They'd be able to see the completed rubric with the feedback. They'd be able to see the written feedback or the verbal feedback that a teacher has left. They'd be able to see curriculum expectations, and they'd also be able to actually see the student submission to help really put all of that feedback into context, and so that those next steps make sense as maybe they're having those learning conversations at home with their child, and kind of maybe helping them move forward in their course. The next part that feeds into Brightspace for Parents is our portfolio tool, which again, if you've come to our past 2 webinars, you'll know a little bit more about that. So portfolio is our tool for documenting evidence of learning and triangulation of assessment. And a really important thing to note here, a couple important things to note actually, is that only portfolio items that educators have decided they've chose to share with parents, and I'll show that in the next slide. It's only the ones that they decide to share with parents that are going to show up in Brightspace for Parents. And what parents will see when they head in there is they'll be able to see their child's reflection on the portfolio artifact. So again, whether it's verbal, whether it's written reflection, they'll be able to see the feedback that the educator left to the student. And they'll also be able to see any curriculum expectations that have been associated with that artifact. And again, you'll know from our previous webinars, or if you're using Portfolio yourself, that there's an area in Portfolio where educators are able to leave anecdotal notes. And I just want to confirm and clarify that those will not be shared with parents. So again, any private anecdotal notes that you're putting in your teacher area comment box does not get shared home. It's only the feedback that the student would be able to see. And again, that added measure on top of if you decide to share that item home with parents. So again, as an educator, when I'm in my portfolio tool, towards the bottom of where I can leave that student feedback, where I can put my anecdotal notes, where I can add my curriculum expectations, at the very bottom, there's a toggle button that says parent sharing. And if I've clicked and toggled it so that the the shared is highlighted green with a green tick mark, then I know that's been shared home with parents or guardians. And then when the parent is in the Brightspace for Parents view, they'll have this portfolio item area, and it's going to show, again, the most recent portfolio artifact that a teacher has decided to share home. But when they click into that, they'll be able to see lots more information when they click into that. So I have a nice example of that here. So when they click in, again, they can see a larger image or video of what the student captured. They can see the title, the date timestamp. They'll be able to listen or read the student's reflection, whether it's been an oral reflection or whether it's been a written typed reflection. And then on the right side of that, you can see, they'll see Tammy teacher's feedback that she's left to Will. She'll see the expectations that Tammy has attached to this particular item to show how it's fitting in with the course. And then that's what they'll see. So again, they're getting more of that context around how this particular piece of evidence was important to their students' learning and how it's faring in with what they're learning and how they're doing. Okay, and the last area of Brightspace for parents that I'd like to talk about is the latest posts area. So what this is an aggregated view of all of the activity feed posts from each class that the child is enrolled in. And you as an educator in your activity feed can pin posts or assignments to make them appear first in the parent and guardian's feed. And as an educator yourself, you can choose, you'll see here if I flip to the next slide, in the educator posts, I've got an assignment here. You can see towards the bottom, I can allow students to make posts. It's really meant to be this nice interactive feed of activity and engagement with your students. And when I flip to what the guardian sees, the right-hand side of the slide here, I can see the information, I can see any attachments, but as a parent, I don't have an ability to comment, and nor will I be able to see any comments left by anyone other than my own child. So again, by using activity feed as an educator in your class, you're creating that window into the classroom by letting parents and guardians see the same posts and the same reminders that you're already sharing with your students. But again, the parent and guardian is only going to see comments or anything left by their own children, so you don't have to worry about the privacy and the safety of other students. All of the other information, comments, posts made by other students is going to get completely stripped out. So the parent who is not the parent or the guardian of those children will not see it. Okay, and now I would like to turn it over to Kevin Bradbeer to walk us through the next steps.
Thanks, Val. I appreciate the very detailed and very clear overview of Brightspace for Parents so far. And thanks for a couple of minutes to outline next steps. These are TDSB specific, so apologies for folks who may be on the call who are not from Toronto. But so a few questions in the chat about, is this on now and how come it's not working? So at this moment, Brightspace for Parents is not active. We have completed all of our technical background work, and we're ready to have the switch flipped, for lack of a better explanation, probably Thursday overnight. And what this means is that the back-end work will be done and our participating pilot schools will then be ready to go. There are a couple of pieces, requirements, if you will, that need to be in place before parents can begin to access Brightspace for Parents. The number one item, and I've highlighted in the second bullet there, sorry, in the third bullet there, is that parents must have an email address recorded in Trillium. There is a file that's created between our student information system Trillium and Brightspace that basically says which parents have access to which students, so that parents only see the students they're supposed to. Obviously, they're only their own, but in some cases you may have custody situations where the parents have different levels of access to the children. So the student information system determines who can see which content or perhaps not at all of certain students. So we use Trillium for doing that. And that file is basically prepped and ready, but it is only going to work for those parents who have an email address in Trillium. If you're wondering which of your parents have an email address recorded in Trillium, your office administrator or principal, vice principal can run a report out of Trillium to see how many parents of the students in your particular classroom or school, if you wish, have an email address recorded. Our district average is 82%, which is pretty decent. We have some schools that are at 100% email addresses recorded in Trillium, but we have others that are in the low 60s. So this is probably something to check before you get into wanting to use Brightspace for Parents, just to kind of see where you are. And then it may be a couple of messages home to maybe 4 or 5 people if there are some gaps there. The first item that I wanted to mention, though, is that before people begin to think about using Brightspace for Parents, I would want to make sure that you're using Brightspace itself. So Val took us through a few different areas of content where Brightspace Brightspace content comes through and is visible within Brightspace for Parents. And often we're seeing people starting with either portfolio and or activity feed, but you need to be using at least one of those areas, and I would say preferably 2 or more, so that when parents do come in, there actually is some content there for them to see. If we get parents logged in and the teacher hasn't started using Brightspace with their students yet, then there's going to be literally nothing for parents to see, and they probably won't come back if their first or second experience is sort of underwhelming. So let's assume that as a teacher, you're using Portfolio and hopefully Activity Feed with your students. You've sent some information to your parents and they've all got email addresses recorded in Trillium, so that's great. That is a nightly process that we run. So if you found a parent and said, oh, you don't have an email address, they came in the next day and provided that information. The day after that, they would basically be ready to go to log into Brightspace for Parents. So let's assume that that's all in place. We've got content in Brightspace. We have parents with email addresses in Trillium. The next step in that process is for parents to create an account in order to access Brightspace for Parents. So this is one of the benefits of this particular tool. It's not just a web link that a teacher can grab and share, and that in turn a parent can then pass on to cousins and aunts and uncles or anyone who happens to get access to that link. You actually require an account behind a login and password before you can see Brightspace for Parents content. And again, the key driver of that is that email address that's recorded in Trillium. So one-time step that's required is for parents to create an account. And this has been some of the technical work that we've been undertaking in TDSB this fall, is getting that account process ready. So that is ready now. Parents will go in, enter in their email address. They will have to enter in a couple of pieces of information to verify that that student is actually theirs. So for example, the student number and their postal code. Their account will get created, and then they will now have an account to log into Brightspace for Parents. And that's essentially the steps that they will have to go through. Once they've created that account, it's only a one-time activity that they need to accomplish that. And then they just use that email address and the password they created to log into Brightspace for Parents anytime they want. And Val and Adam, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that they can do that through either mobile or a laptop, desktop type of computing experience. But Brightspace really renders quite well on a mobile phone as well. Parents can log in once a day, 10 times a day, once a week. It's completely up to them. And Val did mention that that notification is available to get sort of a weekly email summary. I'm not sure about yourself, but I'm hearing from a lot of parents that they don't really love the weekly summary as the only way to receive information, because by the time they receive that and maybe get around to viewing it, some of those dates and activities have passed. So they are really looking for an opportunity to log in on a more timely basis to get updates and things like that. So I hope that was clear. I'll take a pause, and I believe there's two ways you can ask questions, and Adam and Val, please advise. I know we've had a few questions in the group chat, but there's also a question and answer pod that's available as well. So I'll take a pause and wait and see if there's any questions.
Hey, Kevin, this is Adam. We have a question in the Q&A pod. How do parents record their email addresses in Trillium for your board?
So that could happen in a few different ways. So the parent could contact the school directly. They could make a phone call. They could come in. They could also send that obviously in an email to the teacher, to the principal. If they happen to have the office administrator's email address, they could do it that way. Probably the email is going to be the most direct route. And then someone in the office has to just go into Trillium and physically copy and paste that email address and attach it to the child's record in Trillium.
Thank you.
Awesome. That's a great question. And thanks so much, Kevin, for sharing those next steps in TDSB. I know folks seem really excited about that. And you might have some questions as we wrap up, that wraps up Brightspace for Parents and some information about that. But where do you actually go to access those tools? So again, this is for our Toronto District folks on the line. So first you'll need to head to tdsb.elearningontario.ca and log in with your regular board credentials. And because the student information system automatically creates your classes and populates your class list, you'll just need to head in and activate your pre-made classes in order to get started. So if you need help finding or activating your courses, just make sure that you check out the "Is this your first time stopping by" widget on the homepage, which should be nice front and center when you log into tdsb.elearningontario.ca. And if you're looking for more help, more resources, and you want to know where to go, I just want to make sure there's a couple resources and support that you're aware of. So again, when you log into TDSB Brightspace, you'll notice on the far right hand, we have it highlighted here on the screen that there's a Get Help Here link. And if you click on that, it's going to take you to a Google site that's made by TDSB, and it's a really, really awesome place for finding loads of resources on how to use tools in Brightspace and how to get you started. If you haven't been there before or checked that out, I really highly recommend that you do that. There's a lot of great information and resources there. And if you're still hungry for more, then you can head on over to d2l.com/BLE for Ontario-specific stories, blog posts, and resources, or you can also head to d2l.com/tutorials to find D2L's own YouTube tutorial page. So we have lots of short videos on there about how to use all of our products. And with that, again, I want to thank everyone for watching this webinar.
Okay, folks, we have a few more questions open, and Kevin, you can help me out here. So will there be instructions provided to help parents set up their account? So the first answer actually is no. Their parents' accounts are automatically going to be created, but maybe you can provide information on how, if you have already available, how that will be sent out to parents, how they'll be notified about their accounts.
Yes. So in terms of the so the technical name for it is Azure. So it's just a login technology that we're using from Microsoft. Parents need to set up an account in Azure, which is how they log into TDSB. And that, yes, there will be a little video set of instructions to help them with that. It's very straightforward. It's similar to any kind of account creation, that you would do on a variety of different websites. So basically just name, email address, and then you're going to confirm a couple of pieces of information about one of your students and then go from there. I mean, if, just given the number of parents we have in the district, there will probably be people, who may have difficulty with that, but it's I think fairly straightforward, and we've really worked hard to try to make sure the language is clear and simple.
Excellent, thank you. We have two more questions here. So when will sharing portfolio with parents be available? So that answer is once the parent accounts are set up at TDSB, that option will become available. So Kevin, if you could just remind us one more time when the proposed timeline on that.
Sure. So we're hoping to have that file run this week for the very first time. So technically, Brightspace for Parents will be available within TDSB. We're going to proceed slowly in the beginning. We're going to basically be adding a couple of classes a week, making sure that our documentation is clear, that parents are having a successful experience, and if there's anything we need to clarify or add or delete in our instructions or the login process, etc., we want to make sure that we take care of that very early on before we launch widely. So our current thinking is that we'll be basically adding a couple classes per week for the first month or so. And then I would say mid to late January is when we're hoping to do a broader sharing with teachers across the district to say, basically, we're good to go. We're going to have a letter that you can either choose to print off and send home or email home, or however you wish to communicate that to your parents. We'll be making that available through the Brightspace support site, the TDSB Brightspace support site that Val mentioned just a few moments ago.
Great, thank you, Kevin. And the one last question here, we're actually not going to be comparing Brightspace for Parents with other tools at the moment. Our goal here was to show you what Brightspace options are available for a parent solution. So Valerie did walk us through that. Unfortunately, we cannot speak to other tools like the question kind of proposed. And I believe that is it for our questions at this point. So thank you again, everybody, for your questions and for your participation. Thank you, Kevin and Valerie. You did a wonderful job today. The recording of this webinar will be made available to all those who registered. And that is it for us today. Thank you very much and have a great day, everyone.